Pasha, Tifitulin, was only 9 years old. He didn't go to school. Not first grade, not any grade. Instead, he stood in the parking lot outside a hypermarket, washing cars for spare change. And when he was gone, it would become clear that there had been plenty of chances to intervene. But not a single one of them worked. Gorilovo is the outskirts of St. Petersburg, a neighborhood where Soviet-era apartment blocks gradually give way to industrial zones, highways, and shopping centers. This is where he lived, at 38, a Krasnoselsko highway, in a large family. His mother had 7 children. She didn't work. The family survived on government benefits, and the father showed up from time to time, apparently playing no significant role in day-to-day life. Neighbors would later say the mother tried her best, that she loved her family, but money was always short. And so was supervision. The family had been cited twice for inadequate parenting. Not for physical harm, not for starvation, but rather for what wasn't there. For the lack of order and attention that simply couldn't stretch across 7 children. School never worked out for Pasha. His grandmother would later tell reporters he just wasn't ready. He'd mix up his shoes, couldn't grasp basic concepts. The children's ombudsman would put it more simply. The parents never filed an enrollment application. And so, at 9 years old, he hadn't completed a single grade. Instead of school, his life revolved around the parking lot on Talinskoye Highway, outside the Lenta hypermarket. Pasha would walk up to cars and offer to wash headlights and windshields. For that, people would give him change, sometimes 50 rubles, sometimes 100. His mother would later tell reporters she gave him pocket money herself and had no idea about any side job. His grandmother said the opposite. The family knew. Pasha didn't have a phone. His old one had broken long ago, and a new one was never bought. People around the area knew him. He'd been spotted in Novosely, in Baltiyskaya Zhemchuzhina. Thin, barely 4 feet tall, wearing a black jacket with red accents. Some locals weren't even surprised. Kids in that neighborhood had been hustling outside stores for years. Some were saving up for a phone, others just wanted to feel grown up. But this, you have to admit, was different. Someone who was only 9, with no phone, no school, no supervision, out on a parking lot every day. January 30th, a Thursday, around 2 in the afternoon, Pasha left home. He told his mom he'd go sledding on Kolobanovskaya Street, then stop by Lenta. He was wearing a black winter jacket, dark blue pants with camo patches, a beige plaid scarf, and a black backpack. Around 5 in the evening, cameras inside an accessory shop within Lenta captured him. That was the last frame. After that, silence. That evening, his mother and grandmother went out looking for him. They thought maybe he'd gone inside to warm up, taken the wrong bus, stayed at someone's place. They didn't find him. That same night, the mother contacted the police. And from this point on, a story begins in which, as would later become clear, there had been chances to help Pasha, more than once. But every single one was missed. The police accepted the report, but the first hours are always a waiting game. While the system was gearing up, the mother acted on her own. She went through courtyards, checked stairwells, asked Pasha's friends. They gave her a lead. He'd been planning to go to Lenta. She went there, and the hypermarket confirmed. Someone matching his description had been seen near the accessories section around evening. He came in, looked around, and left. Where to? No one noticed. Pasha had nothing on him that day. No money, no phone, no transit pass, just a backpack. And for someone who was only 9 and used to hanging around stores, that meant one thing: he couldn't have gone far on his own. If he left the area, it was with someone. On the morning of January 31st, the Liza Alert search team joined the effort. Coordinator Anton Alexeyev would later explain, "The disappearance of anyone under 18 is always a high priority search. People started arriving on their own. A command post was set up right on Talinskoye Highway. Within 24 hours, 249 people were out searching. 37 car patrols, 2 drone deployments. Locals joined without being asked. A print shop produced flyers. A restaurant fed volunteers hot meals. By evening, it was clear. The mass sweep had yielded nothing. The large-scale search was called off. From that point, only experienced search operatives and investigators continued. And when they began reviewing surveillance footage from around Lenta, one recording showed something specific. The cameras ran around the clock, and investigators didn't have to look long. On one recording, there was Pasha. He walks out of the hypermarket, crosses the parking lot toward the fast food restaurant, and stops next to a white Toyota Fortuner SUV. A brief conversation with the driver. And then Pasha gets into the front seat on his own, calmly, without any resistance. Shortly after 4, the vehicle pulls away. From there, the route was reconstructed through camera footage. The Toyota exits onto Talinskoye Highway, turns onto Aninskoye Highway. The last capture near the village of Yalgalevo, Lomonosovsky district. From the hypermarket to that point, 18 kilometers, just over 20 minutes of driving. Around 4:45 p.m., the vehicle arrived at its destination. After that, neither the Toyota nor Pasha appeared on any camera again. And here, the story shifts dramatically. While the search had been combing courtyards and parks, everything had stayed within the framework of a routine disappearance. Now, it was clear. He had left with someone and hadn't come back. The investigative committee reclassified the case under a serious charge involving the use of force against a person under 18. The mass volunteer search was suspended. Only experienced teams remained on the ground: Liza, alert, operatives, and investigators. The search area shifted along the Toyota's route, and one central question remained. Pasha had gotten into that vehicle willingly. That's how you get in with someone you know, or someone who's already made a promise. The Toyota Fortuner was parked outside a private house in Yagalevo. Not hidden, not tucked into a garage, simply parked by the gate. Police located it quickly. Cameras along Aninskoye Highway traced the route to its end. The vehicle was registered to Pyotr Zhilkin, age 38, a sole proprietor in building construction, originally from Novodruzhinsk, Luhansk region. At some point, he'd lived in Rostov Oblast, then relocated to Leningrad Oblast. In Yalgalevo, he'd settled in a private house, lived alone with 2 dogs. According to the outlet Bumaga, Zhilkin had a daughter roughly the same age. He was divorced from his ex-wife. When journalists tried to reach her, she heard Pyotr's name and hung up. On January 31st, investigators arrived with a search warrant. The house was empty. Zhilkin wasn't there. But cameras at the property had captured something. On the evening of the 30th, the very day Pasha disappeared, a Renault Logan pulled up to the house. A woman stepped out, spent the night with someone, and left by taxi in the morning. About an hour after she arrived, Zhilkin got into the Toyota and drove off somewhere. He returned past midnight. The following day, as investigators would later document in their detention motion, he washed the vehicle, destroyed security camera recordings from his own property, and deleted files from electronic devices. After that, he switched to a different car and drove away, leaving the gates open. The trail led southwest toward Pskov Oblast. According to one theory, his final destination wasn't Pskov at all, but the Baltics. The border was just a few hours' drive away. He had acquaintances in Pskov. Zhilkin showed up at their door and immediately said, "People are looking for him, but he's not guilty." Not a word about Pasha. His friends didn't press the matter and bought him a new SIM card. Zhilkin started drinking, most likely trying to forget. But forgetting wasn't working. On February 2nd, police caught up with him. Officers traced his direction of travel using cameras along the highway, the same method that had found the Toyota. Zhilkin was located in Pskov. During the apprehension, he tried to flee by car, and a pursuit ensued. Officers had to use force. During his first interrogation, he said nothing. Not a word about Pasha. Not a word about what happened in the vehicle. Not a word about Yelgalevo. Investigators knew the route, knew the vehicle, knew Pasha had gotten in willingly. But the most critical piece, where Pasha was and what had happened to him, Zhilkin refused to say. Then, after several hours, he finally spoke. But what he said didn't clarify the picture. If anything, it raised even more questions. During the interrogation, Zhilkin was initially silent, then spoke and said, "I was going to come in on my own. You were just faster." Investigators noted it down but didn't believe him. A man who destroys security footage, washes his vehicle, and flees to another region doesn't look like someone planning to turn himself in. Then, he admitted full guilt. His attorney didn't object, and Zhilkin laid out his version. Calmly, methodically, like someone who had thought through exactly what he would say. According to him, he'd met Pasha at the Lenta parking lot. They were acquainted. Pasha had washed his car for money more than once. That day, he invited him into the Toyota, and from there, according to Zhilkin, a conflict broke out. Pasha allegedly demanded 500,000 rubles from him in exchange for silence. 500,000 from someone who was 9. Zhilkin claimed he lost his temper and struck Pasha with his fist to the head. The boy began vomiting. After several more blows, Pasha went still. According to the investigators' findings, the outcome occurred right there in the vehicle. Zhilkin named a location, a body of water near the lower Shengursky waterfall, close to the village of Bolshoye Zaborodye, non-freezing springs. He tied Pasha to iron pipes and lowered him into the water. Investigators headed there that same evening, but decided not to search in the dark. They would wait for dawn. The version looked smooth, too smooth. A conflict over blackmail, a blow struck in the heat of the moment, panic, a classic framework. He's the victim of circumstance, not someone who planned this. But one question remained. Silence. About what? What exactly could Pasha have known? What could he have threatened an adult man with so severely that the man decided this was simpler? To that question, Zhilkin gave an evasive answer. And investigators noted that too. He decided to wait for morning. The volunteers didn't. The search team, Poidum Nadum, headed to the specified location that night, Simonovsky Creek, the area near the lower Shengursky waterfall, close to the village of Bolshoi Zaborodi. Outside, deep below zero. The creek was partially frozen, but not entirely. Non-freezing springs kept patches of water exposed. The searchers scanned the bank with flashlights. On the surface of the ice, they noticed a bump. Something frozen in, uneven, unnatural for the terrain. They broke through the crust with an axe or ice pick. First, an ice-covered backpack appeared, black. Then clothing, a beige plaid scarf. Everything matched the description from the alert. Around 4 a.m, Pasha was recovered from the water. His legs bound with tape, his hands too, his head wrapped. Heavy cast-iron pipes had been tied to him to keep him from surfacing. 30 kilometers from the Lenta parking lot, 4 days beneath the ice. By 6 a.m, the investigative team arrived on scene. The investigative committee confirmed the discovery. Documentation and forensic examinations commenced. The case was placed under oversight at the central office. Bastrikin personally instructed the head of the St. Petersburg Main Investigative Directorate, Pavel Vimentsev, to report on interim results. The family identified Pasha. In neighborhood groups for Gorilovo and Novogorilovo, a collection was announced for funeral expenses. And here's what matters. The body of water where he was found was only 10 kilometers from Zhilkin's house, not a random spot. He knew that road. He knew that creek. Investigators began reconstructing the precise timeline of what happened between 4 p.m. and midnight on January 30th. From the moment the Toyota left the parking lot to the moment Zhilkin returned home alone. The investigation reconstructed the chain minute by minute. Cameras, testimony, vehicle examination, forensic results. Everything fell into a single line. January 30th, around 4 p.m, Pasha walks out of Lenta, crosses the parking lot toward the fast food restaurant. Zhilkin is already there, in a white Toyota Fortuner with a cracked bumper. They know each other. Pasha has washed his car before, more than once. This time, Zhilkin calls him over, promises to buy him something. Pasha walks up, gets into the front seat. Shortly after 4, the vehicle leaves the parking lot. Then, 18 kilometers along Talinskoye and Aninskoye highways. 20 minutes on the road. Somewhere along that stretch, something occurs between them that investigators would document as a conflict. What exactly was said? More on that later. But the outcome came quickly. Zhilkin struck Pasha with his fist to the head, right hand, one blow, and vomiting began, then several more. Pasha went still. According to the investigation's findings, it was over right there in the vehicle. A traumatic head injury, an adult man against someone who was only 9. The outcome was predetermined from the first strike. Around 4:45 p.m., the Toyota pulled up to the house in Yalgalevo. And from there, Zhilkin didn't act like a man in panic. He acted like a man who had already decided what he was going to do. He found cast iron pipes in a utility shed, wrapped Pasha with tape, hands, legs, head, loaded him back into the vehicle, drove 10 kilometers to the body of water, tied on the pipes and lowered him into the water, then drove to a car wash, cleaned the interior, returned home past midnight. All of this in one evening, under 8 hours, calmly, methodically, without a single logistical error. That's not how someone acts in the heat of the moment. That's how someone acts when they know exactly what needs to be concealed. That night, after returning home, Zhilkin behaved as if nothing had happened. spent the evening with his partner. They drank. She, according to some sources, didn't know what had occurred. According to others, she knew about his inclinations and stayed silent. She is now giving testimony, and investigators are examining both scenarios. On the morning of the 31st, Jilkin turned on his phone and started reading the news. Liza Alert had already set up a command post. Flyers with Pasha's photo had spread across social media. Neighborhood groups were sharing them with each other. And there he sat, watching all of it, hour after hour. Every update, every post. He watched as over 200 people searched for the person he had already put in the water. When the scale became obvious and police began pulling camera footage, the case was reclassified. Jilkin panicked. He contacted his partner and began pleading, "Tell them I was with you, that I never left." She refused. And then he understood. There would be no alibi. He'd already erased the cameras at his house, deleted the files, washed the vehicle. But it wasn't enough, because the Toyota had already been captured on highway recordings. And he knew it. There was only one option left: run. He switched to another car and headed toward Pskov. During his interrogation, he would later say, "I was planning to come in on my own. You were just faster." But a man who monitors the news, begs for a false alibi, and flees across two regions doesn't look like someone planning to surrender. And if you look closely, something becomes noticeable. Everything Jilkin did after that evening, erasing recordings, washing the vehicle, wasn't aimed at hiding the blow. The blow was a split second. He was hiding everything else. What came before the blow? The reason he'd invited Pasha into the vehicle in the first place. On paper, Pyotr Jilkin looked like a man who had his life together. Sole proprietor, building construction, worked as a foreman. According to journalists, he regularly took out loans from microfinance companies. Yet he owned not just the house in Yalgalevo. He also had 2 additional plots, industrial land, and several vehicles. Education, incomplete secondary. He confirmed this himself in court. Co-workers at the construction sites said nothing remarkable about him. One former employee recalled, "He seemed like a normal guy, went out drinking at the sauna with people. Nothing that would raise a red flag." But there was another side. Jilkin had been convicted multiple times. Theft of a laptop, motorcycle theft in the city of Shakti, with an accomplice, assaulting a police officer. 3 convictions, and not one of them led to serious incarceration. He remained free, kept working, moved from region to region. On social media, a separate layer, Jilkin's pages contained reposts from far-right communities. He wrote in Russian diaspora chats, commented on a channel called Russian Nationalist, called for people not to stay silent and to organize. His Telegram avatar featured the square of Svarog, an ancient Slavic pagan symbol. By the time of his arrest, most messages had been deleted, and his VKontakte page had been wiped entirely. And here's what matters. The convictions, the aggression, the nationalist leanings, all of it existed alongside an ordinary life. Construction work, a paycheck, a car, a house. To his colleagues, he was a normal guy. To the system, a person without a flag that would have made anyone watch him more closely. Meanwhile, Jilkin lived 10 minutes from the parking lot. Yalgalevo is a small village. Everyone knows everyone. And they knew Jilkin too, but kept their distance. A neighbor named Valeria told journalists, he didn't talk to anyone, didn't greet people. walked his dog without a muzzle or leash, and reacted with aggression to any comments. He was never seen with family or friends. But all of that. Everyday nuisances. What surfaced next was on an entirely different scale. In 2024, in a local body of water near Yalgilevo, fishermen discovered a local resident named Valentin. A kettlebell had been tied to him with rope. On his back, a backpack with keys. Investigators examined the circumstances. No criminal evidence was found, and the case was closed. Neighbors didn't buy it. Valentin was known in the village as an open, kind person who visited everyone and helped out. The theory that he tied a kettlebell to himself and jumped into the water didn't sit right with anyone. And so the residents turned to Zhilkin. He had cameras on his house that might have captured something that day. They asked to see the footage. Zhilkin refused. No explanation, just no. It seemed strange, but nobody pushed further. The case was closed. There were no grounds to demand the recordings. And then, Pasha appeared. When the details came out, water, pipes, tape, the same area. Neighbors immediately connected one with the other. The same body of water, the same method, the same person nearby, and the same refusal to share camera footage. Valeria would say it directly. That lake where they're searching for Pasha, that's where it happened a year ago. And the pattern, almost identical. Investigators are now examining Zhilkin's possible involvement in that case. No confirmation yet, but there are too many coincidences to simply ignore. Pasha's parents were not married, not because things hadn't worked out, but deliberately. According to journalists, the absence of a marriage certificate allowed them to receive higher social benefits. The father line for all 7 children was left blank. Officially, the mother was classified as a single parent. In reality, the father lived nearby. He'd come and go, sometimes disappearing for months. He'd come from Moldova, worked as a manual laborer when he worked. Neither parent was officially employed. The family lived on benefits. 7 children isn't just a number. It's a constant shortage of everything: space, food, attention, time. In families like this, the older ones grow up faster, and the younger ones are left to fend for themselves. Pasha fell through earlier than the rest, but he wasn't the only one. One of his sisters was enrolled in 1st grade in 2020, at the very end of the school year. Before that, she hadn't attended school anywhere, and due to the late enrollment, she was held back a year. The others also frequently fell ill and missed classes for weeks, sometimes months. At some point, someone noticed. In December 2025, a commission came to the apartment. Police and municipal representatives. The questions were specific. Why aren't the children in school? Why are they missing classes? Why are the living conditions like this? After the inspection, the family was placed on a watch list as being in a socially dangerous situation. December, 1 month before Pasha walked out the door and never came back. The commission came, saw everything, documented it, checked the box and left. No emergency measures, no case management, no oversight of where a 9-year-old who doesn't attend school and spends every day alone in a parking lot was spending his time. A watch list is a piece of paper, and paper didn't protect Pasha. The problems in the Tifitullin family had been in plain sight for years, but the watch list, only in December 2025. 1 inspection, 1 checkbox, 0 follow-up. Attorney Ivan Solovyov would later say it plainly. the lifestyle of this family, and the way parental oversight of Pasha was carried out. All of it will be examined by investigators. But there's something worse. According to journalists, Zhilkin regularly stopped at the Lenta parking lot and offered minors rides in his car for money. Not once, not by chance. Systematically. He bought coffee for the kids who washed cars, tried to strike up conversations. Most of them sensed something was off and refused. But Pasha didn't. Criminal profiler Yevgeny Lubkov posed a question that can't be brushed aside. Why didn't those young people, whom Zhilkin had offered to spend time with for money, go to an adult about it? And he answered it himself. Because there was no atmosphere of trust in their families. Because at 9 years old, there's no critical thinking, especially when the adults around you haven't explained what should raise alarm. And here's where the systemic failure lies. The Lenta parking lot isn't a dark alley. It's an open, busy place. An adult man drove up to other people's children time after time and offered them money. And no one, not security, not passers-by, not parents, stopped him. No one called the police. No one asked a question. And it was precisely this fact, Zhilkin's systematic approaches, that led investigators to re-examine his blackmail story from an entirely different angle. In the court documents, the wording is dry. Previously acquainted young T. 3 words that changed the entire picture. This was not a chance encounter, not an impulse. Didn't see him, didn't beckon, didn't drive off. Pasha and Zhilkin had been in contact long before January 30th. According to journalists, Pasha had washed that specific Toyota Fortuner at the parking lot on multiple occasions. Zhilkin paid, bought food, talked. During interrogation, he confirmed it himself. Yes, he knew the boy. And so everything on the cameras. How Pasha calmly approaches the vehicle, gets into the front seat without hesitation, isn't explained by naivety. He was walking towards someone familiar, someone who had given him money before, bought him coffee, someone who seemed safe. If the contacts were regular, Pasha had time to see, notice, understand something about Zhilkin, something the man wouldn't want shown, something worth paying to keep hidden, or, if not paying, silencing another way. And here, the blackmail theory stops being absurd. A 9-year-old who regularly spent time around this man could easily have learned something not meant for outside eyes. The question is no longer whether Pasha was blackmailing Zhilkin. The question is, over what? 500,000 rubles, a specific amount. Not give me money, but an ultimatum with a number. From someone who hadn't completed a single grade, who mixed up his shoes, and couldn't count well enough to pass a school screening. Investigators latched on to precisely this. Operatives uncovered messages in which Pasha threatened to reveal certain information and demanded payment. Here's what's important. The phrasing was beyond his age, and so was the amount. The very logic, silence in exchange for money, isn't something that occurs to a kid who washes headlights for 50 rubles. So investigators asked the question that changed the direction of the case. Did Pasha come up with this on his own? Could he have independently constructed a blackmail scheme, named a sum, formulated a threat? Or did someone coach him? Someone who knew exactly what leverage could be used against Zhilkin. Someone Pasha had told about what he'd seen or learned. And according to journalists, investigators developed a specific theory about who was behind that demand. And that theory turned out to be more disturbing than the blackmail itself. According to the investigative theory, here's what the picture looked like. At some point before January 30th, Zhilkin offered Pasha 5,000 rubles for services that had nothing to do with washing cars. Pasha refused and likely told someone at home. The normal response would be to call the police, file a report, get your child far away from that person. But according to the investigative theory, something else happened. The mother and stepfather learned about Zhilkin's troubling interest and saw in it not a threat, but an opportunity. 500,000 rubles for a family living on benefits that hadn't seen that kind of money in years. That was a fortune. Investigators are exploring the theory that it was the parents who may have devised the blackmail scheme, that they named the amount, and that they sent Pasha back to the man who had already shown what he wanted. Not to wash headlights, but to deliver an ultimatum. Pasha went to an adult man with a demand for 500,000, without a phone, without a safety net, without a single adult by his side. Someone should have protected him. Instead, he was sent straight to the source of danger. This theory has not been officially confirmed. Investigators are still verifying it. But if it's true, then Pasha was caught between two forces, each of which saw him not as a person, but as a tool. For one, an object. For the others, a means of income. Investigators questioned Zhilkin's partner separately. And what matters here isn't just her position, but what she did and didn't do. She refused to give him an alibi. That's a fact. But here's the second fact. She didn't call the police. Not that evening, not the next day, not on the day when every channel was running alerts with Pasha's photo. She saw the search, knew who they were looking for, and stayed silent. According to journalists, the partner had been aware of Zhilkin's inclinations long before January 30th. She didn't suspect. She knew. The nature of those inclinations is documented in the case files, but hasn't been publicly named. She lived with that knowledge and didn't consider it grounds for action. And here's what makes the picture even heavier. On the evening of the 30th, that very same day, a Renault Logan pulled up to the house in Yelgalevo. A woman stepped out with someone very young, spent the night, left by taxi in the morning. Who was she? What was her relationship to Zhilkin? Did she know what had happened just hours earlier inside the white Toyota? All of this is now being investigated. But the fact itself, that someone brought a minor to the home of a man who had just done what he did that very evening, and no one stopped it. Around Zhilkin, a ring of silence. The partner stayed quiet. The neighbors kept their distance. Pasha's parents, if the investigative theory is correct, didn't go to the police. They went after money. Everyone knew something. No one spoke up in time. TASS reported, investigators are examining Zhilkin's possible involvement in other disappearances of minors in Leningrad Oblast. Not just Pasha's case. A former head of the relevant division at the St. Petersburg Main Directorate of Internal Affairs responded bluntly. Prison doesn't cure people like that. In parallel, the closed case of Valentin from Yalgalevo is being reopened. The same neighbor who was found in the water with a kettlebell tied to him. In 2024, it was written off as a voluntary departure from life. Now, in light of the new case, there are too many coincidences. Water, weights, the same area, and the same person nearby. But the main thing isn't the expansion of the case. The main thing is how every fact gathered over these days converges on a single point. Why did Zhilkin regularly drive to the Lenta parking lot? Why did he offer other people's children money to go for a ride? Why did Pasha attempt to extort $500,000 from him? Why did the parents, if the investigative theory is correct, send their son back to this man instead of calling the police? Why did the partner stay silent about his inclinations for years? Why did he flee in a panic across 2 regions, destroying every digital trace? Every one of these questions leads to the same answer. Every fact points to the same conclusion. The word that connects everything hasn't been spoken once in this story. But investigators have already examined the contents of his laptop, phone, and flash drives. On the devices, they found files whose content left no doubt about the nature of his interests. And now the entire story falls into place. On January 30th, inside the Toyota, Zhilkin offered Pasha $5,000 for services that had nothing to do with washing cars. Pasha refused and threatened to go to the police. He demanded $500,000, likely coached by those he told at home. Zhilkin didn't strike because of money. He struck because Pasha could expose everything. The files on the laptop, the hunting at the parking lot, the offers that others had heard too. One word to the police, and his double life would have collapsed within a day. Now reassemble this story from the beginning. Fast food meals, not generosity, but bait. A ride for money, not eccentricity, but systematic predation. Washing cars, not a side job, but a point of contact. Erasing cameras, fleeing toward the border. Not panic, but the reflex of a man who had been living a double life for a long time. Pasha could have been saved. At every stage, someone could have intervened. The school he was never enrolled in. Child services, which came a month earlier and left with a checkbox. Parking lot security, past which an adult man drove off with other people's children time after time. The parents who, if the investigative theory is correct, sent their son not to the police, but back to a predator. The partner who knew and stayed silent. But he was 9. He washed headlights for 50 rubles, and he ended up alone against everyone. Dear parents and all adults, please talk to your children. Stay connected with them. Ask questions if you ever suspect something is wrong. Because the most important thing is communication, not silence. What do you think about this video? Share your thoughts in the comments, hit like and subscribe to our channel. See you next time.